All right, I just finished The Sun and the Star from the world of Percy Jackson, The Sun and the Star, a Nico D'Angelo adventure. This is what the cover looks like. We are going to do a brutally honest review on it because I loved it overall. I thought it was so nostalgic. I thought the writing really reminded me of when I was a kid because I was seriously obsessed with Percy Jackson. Changed my life for sure. I read every single book. And when I heard this book was coming out, I was so excited for it. And then I literally forgot about it. But then I saw it at Indigo. I was like, I need to read this because I loved Nico and Will. Like, oh, I love Nico, first of all. I think he's such an interesting character. And of course, I just had to start rereading Percy Jackson after I read this book because it's so nostalgic. And seeing Nico, like, this is the Titan Squares. And this is when Nico first comes in, and like seeing how cute and happy he was when he was a kid. Oh my gosh, I was so sad. It made me like so sad. It was so good, but I had a lot of criticisms. I gave it a 3 out of 5 on Goodreads. And the thing about me is I'll never finish a book I don't like. So typically I'll read a book and give it like 5 stars because I enjoyed it and I finished it, and there's so much wisdom to be learned from books. So usually it's like a 4 or 5 star review. I obviously enjoyed it because I would never finish a book I didn't like. But oh my gosh, sometimes I was reading it and I was just cringing. My biggest criticism with this is that it felt like there were 0 stakes. Like, reading about Tartarus when I was a kid felt so scary. And it isn't about the fact that I've grown up and I've read like Stephen King in between my first Percy Jackson read and this reread, if you will. It's because of the writing. Like, reading Annabeth and Percy fall into Tartarus in Mark of Athena. Oh my gosh. I was so scared for them. And then when they were actually in Tartarus, I was like tweaking. I was genuinely so scared because the writing makes it seem terrifying. And then when Nico, later on in Heroes of Olympus, when Nico is stuck in Tartarus with the pomegranate seeds and stuff, I'm like, that was so scary. And they keep making references to it in this book, and I like making references to his time when he was alone in Tartarus, and I feel like that's just doing a disservice to the story because in this one, they just walk down to Tartarus like it's any other day. And the worst part about that is they chose to go to Tartarus and Will didn't bring a singular weapon. And it's like, I know it's because that's never really been his thing. Like, he's a healer. He's the healer at camp. He's not really a fighter, but it's like it just felt like there were no preparation to walk into Tartarus, but they're also choosing to go to Tartarus because that was the whole quest. And I just feel like that loss of choice used to make it so scary and make it seem like such a big deal, and now they just walk down there. I always felt like Tartarus was like the scariest place that you'd ever go, and only people in the series have been taken there against their will. So like, I know it's the quest, but choosing to go to Tartarus, it made the stakes feel like so low. But at the same time, I kind of didn't mind that because it's like, in Heroes of Olympus and in Percy Jackson, there have been instances where pretty much the entire world's fate were resting on like a team of like 7 people, or like on an army, like entire Camp Half-Blood. There'd be like a battle, and then if they win, like the world is saved or whatever. And I'm kind of glad that this one was like a lower stakes quest because it's just like these 2 guys. Like, it's just Will and Nico. Will doesn't have a freaking weapon, so I'm kind of glad that it was just like they were just rescuing Bob. That was like the whole quest. They just had to rescue Bob because he was under Nyx's capture kind of thing. But Nyx is also like a pre-Titan. So the entire time, like, she's more powerful than a Titan. She's on like the same level as Gaia. That's what this book keeps like pushing. She's literally one of the most powerful beings of the universe because she was born from chaos. Like, she's pretty much born from like the start of the universe. So how did they just defeat her? that's why I was so anxious for like the final battle, because what does Rick even do with that? Like, how does he expect to write these two guys beating Nyx and making it seem realistic? But then he did pull through. He wrote it in a way that made it seem realistic, because Nico brought his whole army of skeletons, and I forget that Nico is so powerful. This book really did a good job of showing his powers, which I thought was really interesting. Will, in the final battle, shows that he fully can sing a note that can like propel people backwards, and then he can also give people instant hay fever. Where was that? Where were those powers the entire rest of the book? Where was that when the Stymphalian birds were attacking him and lifting him into the air and about to drop him? And I'm like, so you don't bring a weapon, and then you don't use your powers until the very end of the final battle, when you literally just had to work your way through the underworld, work your way through Tartarus, beating monsters left and right, and like forcing Nico to do all the work. It just made me so mad, because I love Will. Like, I think he's such an interesting character, and I like that he's kind of like the healer, but he's still a demigod. He's powerful. I don't know why they wrote him in this book in a way that made him just seem like dead meat. I've seen people criticize this, but also say that they understand it, so maybe I'm in the wrong here, but I really did not enjoy the constant fighting about their relationship. The writing was pushing how like Tartarus makes you kind of think dark, deep thoughts and like turn against the people you're with, but they kept fighting about their relationship. So like they would literally be in a battle and Nico would be like, you don't accept my darkness, and Will would be like, I'm trying, and then it's like, you guys are literally about to die. Why are you doing this kind of like insecure rage baiting? Because, and people were like, it makes sense because they're 15-year-old boys navigating their first relationship. But it's like, you guys are in Tartarus though. Like, there are larger stakes than you two having a petty argument. You are literally about to die. I don't know why they were fighting like that. That was just so distracting, because then I would be reading and it's like super exciting, and then they'd spend like half a page talking about their relationship. I love Will and Nico, don't get me wrong, but it just felt like overkill. Okay, my biggest thing that I didn't like about this book, which I might get hate for because I haven't seen anybody talking about it, but the scene where they were talking to Gorgyra about all their stories, about how they met and fell in love and stuff. I loved those chapters. They were so interesting to me. Those were probably my favorite part. Nico asked the nymphs to set up a picnic for him and Will to have like a first date kind of thing, but then the nymphs kind of misunderstood and did it in front of the whole camp at lunchtime, and they were like, Will, Nico wants to go on a date with you, to the whole camp. What? Because that literally reminds me of this.
For me.
I just don't understand the logic behind that scene, because comparatively, we all remember when Nico and Jason had to face Cupid, Eros, and he forced Nico to come out to Jason. And this was not something Nico prepared for, especially he also, like, Eros exposed Nico for having a crush on Percy, and Nico was terrified. Like, he was terrified of the judgment from Jason, but it was also a very formulative point for his character, because he realized that, of course, Jason's gonna accept him. Like, Jason's such a chill guy. And Jason accepted Nico, and now they're, like, friends. So now Nico has the freedom to come out to whomever he wants and be his true self because of this moment with Jason, even though it was a forced coming out. So when I read that as a kid, I was like, wow, this is intense. Like, that to me was such a layered scene, because, like, yeah, it's a forced coming out, and that was really traumatizing for Nico. And they're also fighting Eros, so which we don't talk about enough, the trauma that these demigods have from fighting all these monsters and beings and gods and all sorts of people. But Jason still accepted him. So there's a lot of layers to that scene, and it was really interesting to read about that as a kid. But then here we have this like another forced coming out scene for Nico, and it just didn't feel as interesting. And then the writing brought up the first scene with Eros. Like the book brought up how that also happened, and Nico's like his thoughts are being like, yeah, the nymphs kind of told everyone and jumped the gun, but this time it still felt like my choice. And I don't get it. I don't get it. It's a second forced coming out scene for Nico. It just felt a little bit problematic because it was very interesting to write that the first time it happened because that was such a layered scene. But writing it a second time, I just didn't really know what Rick's motivations were. Maybe I'm the friend that's too woke, but it just reminded me of the scene from Stranger Things season 5 where Will comes out to the entire cast. Like, why is Murray there? It feels like that. Why is Nico being forced to come out to the entire camp? Like, why is Mr. D there? So I was just drawing parallels to season 5 of Stranger Things, which everyone hates. So I felt like it did kind of give that vibes for me. And the forced coming out scene in Stranger Things 5 was getting a lot of criticism. And it just really reminded me, those two scenes really reminded me of each other. That was my biggest criticism of the book. But overall, I stand by my 3-star rating on this because it was more good than bad, if that makes sense. And I also think that this is so important to have a book like this in a series like Percy Jackson, because I loved these books so much. They taught me so much, and Rick has always been good with representation, especially in Heroes of Olympus, especially in Magnus Chase. Like, I learned so much from Magnus Chase. And I was a kid. I was learning about these things through a book that's super accessible, and also about Greek mythology. There's so much going on. But it's all accessible for kids. Like, I was 8 when I started reading Percy Jackson. And now the new generation can enjoy this book within the PJO universe and really enjoy it because it's an epic adventure. It has sweet, heartfelt moments. The ending is so perfect. It's that classic Percy Jackson ending where it's a happy ending and everyone's back at camp and it's like such a vibe. So I would recommend it if you're a Percy Jackson fan, but go into it knowing that there are much better books in the universe, but it's definitely like a must read if you're a big fan of the series. Thanks for listening to my review. I kind of rambled a little bit, but thank you so much. And let me know if you want more book reviews because this is my first time doing it. Bye!